O tēnā koutou, kua huihi mai, kua whakarongo mai ki tēnei pāhotanga. Tūtahi ake, e mihi ana ki a koe, Irene. He noho whakaiti tēnei, ki te noho ki mua i a koe, ki wainganui i a koe. Nō reira tēnā koe, tēnā koutou e whakarongo ana ki tēnei pāhotanga. He kaupapa tino nui i tēnei rā, e pāna ki te whakaoranga tonu o tō tātou wāhinetanga, tērā pia. So, Irene, I'm going to keep this very short because it's very important that we dedicate this full space to you. But I wanted to firstly acknowledge anyone that is joining, anyone that is listening, and also the real privilege that I have to sit in front of you and listen to you. So, tēnā koe opa. Yeah. Let's get straight into it because I'm sure that we are already blessed by sharing this particular space. But first question, ko ai koe, no he koe, korero mai.
Kia ora. He uri ahau no Aotearoa no Tūhoi. It's taho tōku mama, ko Irene Farnham tōku ingoa. So on my mother's side, I'm from Aotearoa, from Wāhine Māori, and just off in the Kono Pāroa and Patuwai Road, around that area. And I'm also from Ruatoki, from Waikirikiri Marae. Yeah.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up, well, funnily enough, I was born in Kaitaia, and then and then when I was 4, we moved to Grey Lynn, and my grandfather and nana, so my grandfather being from Aotearoa and my nana from Tūhoi, they had bought a house in Grey Lynn, and so we moved to live with them when I was 4, and so I grew up with my grandfather. By then my nana had passed away,
right.
So I grew up with my koro and my younger brother, my mother.
Beautiful.
And a couple of uncles. So we had an intergenerational whare, which in those days I suppose is kind of normal, but not that normal if you're not Māori.
Yeah, yeah. We've got a very special kaupapa. Well, they're all special, but this one, we're going to sit in our wāhinetanga today. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to quickly normalise that. So one of the things about being a woman is that we overheat, and I can feel it happening now with my glasses. As you can see, they're getting steamy. And typically we love steamy glasses. But I'm going to sort of quickly take them off, and let's just give me a moment to cool down, and let's just normalise. This is what happens when we are chemically challenged woman. Irene, tēnā koe pai te rongo I tō whakatupuranga, I tō whānau. You said something that you think the sort of intergenerational home is a very Māori thing. I wonder, can you share with us as well in terms of the nexus of your spirituality and your Christianity, your journey?
Well, I suppose for me, like, we grew up with karakia around us. I grew up with hearing a lot of karakia, but I actually wasn't. My father's an atheist. Wow. So my mum and my dad, my mum was, when her and my grandparents moved to Auckland, my nan was actually in the Ringatu church, but she being on her Tūhoi side, but there wasn't any kind of hāhi like that here in Tāmaki, so they started going to the Holy Set. And so I guess we have a bit of a whakapapa there, and they were in the Angies together, and my mum at that time was maybe 11 or 12, and my nan was part of that rōpū. But then, of course, my dad was an atheist, so he kind of said, well,
he Māori?
No, he's Pākehā. Yeah. So when we actually moved to Auckland, my mum had brought me and my brother to Auckland and left my dad behind. And so I ended up living with my with my grandparents. And so when I ended up being in Auckland, then I was suddenly immersed in this different world where we had reo, we had karakia.
So did that come from the church, your immersion?
Well, no, not so much. It was just more in my whānau. But then, even then, my family didn't necessarily go to hāhi. It was just there. It was part of life, karakia, and listen, like you go to the marae and you say everything with a karakia. So I didn't really understand at that time what it was, but I, as I look back, I understand that actually our whānau were deeply spiritual. And even when I started going to kura, I went to Ngā Punua Waioria, even back in those days, we would say everything with karakia, and it was actually Christian karakia, the Lord's Prayer every day. And then it was actually in my 20s that I started looking and actually looking for the Lord in my own life. So that's how I ended up becoming Christian. So
before we get into the fun 20s, if we can start, because one of the tenets, I guess, of orangake is around harikoa, joy. So let's share a joyful memory with us from both when you were growing up and anything that comes to mind from your childhood. What's a joyful memory that you have?
Oh, my family. My whānau were...
Beautiful.
Yeah, we just had... I even think of it now, like what a blessed upbringing I had, with my siblings and my grandparent, my grandfather, my mum. She gave us the best she could. We weren't rich by any means. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of love and extended whānau. And, some of my cousins even now are like some of my best friends. My brothers and we're really super close. So, yeah, like when I look back, it's just life, family.
So if we sort of call that, put a label on it, aroha, tētahi ki tētahi, do you think that what you've just played back and what you've just shared about your how close you are to your whānau, do you think that is connected to your spirituality?
Definitely. It's like the centre of everything is love, aroha, and that manaaki that is within that as well. My koro was such a beautiful man. He, I never got a growling from him once in my life, ever. But Mum just raised us in a way that we knew we had to respect our elders, and so we never took that love for granted. Like we never had an expectation that we were going to be spoiled or anything. Like I don't ever remember anything like that. But he was always so kind to us.
I love that kindness. Yeah. So, and that all sounds very fortunate, and of course you are fortunate and beautiful. And not everyone has that, of course. But maybe if we sort of pivot to your research, and by title, ka whakawāhine au. Ahau.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but my mind obviously went to Wairaka and as a woman and what she did to traverse. So if we start maybe in Wairaka first, because obviously you've got a connection there, and I'll let you talk about that. Was she a natural inspiration for you in this research?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, I think of, like, as a Māori woman, myself, I look at the whakapapa of Māori women before me, and my mum was actually my example of a Māori woman that taught me how to behave and be. And she didn't always, like, tell me overtly with words. It was just the example that she set for me. And so, and even though my nana passed away before I have a memory of her, I was 2, so I had been born, but I had stories of her told to me and about who she was and what her expectations were of her children and her, and her whānau, so I kind of knew what was expected of me as well. And then if I go back further, Wairaka is...
please, because I was very, very presumptuous that people would know who Wairaka is, but kia manawa nui mai, I te hunga e whakarongo ana, if you don't know Wairaka. Maybe, Irene, if you just give us a really quick and... besides, where have you been if you don't know Wairaka? Yeah. But also go to Whakatane during the summer holidays and you'll be able to see. But Irene, if you would be able to share who Wairaka was.
Yeah, well, so Wairaka was the daughter of Toroa, who was the rangatira on the Mātātua waka when it first came to Aotearoa. And they came in around the Whakatane area. And at that time, it wasn't called Whakatane. And the tāne went ashore, all the men went ashore, and the ones that were left on the waka were the women and children and elderly. And it started floating away. And back in those times, of course, if you don't know, women were not, they didn't row the waka, but Wairaka spoke the words kia whakatāne au ahau, and that translates to make me a man, and it was like an incantation or a karakia. So then she picked up the paddle and she rowed the waka to safety, and so that's who Wairaka was. And she was, even now when we sing songs about Wairaka and Aotearoa, and we recognise her as our tupuna wāhine. She's very important to us. But she's an example of wāhine leadership for us. Yep. She didn't do what was expected of her just because it was a role. She did what she needed to do for the benefit of her whānau, and that's kind of what I see happens in a lot of examples for women, and broader than Aotearoa, but in Māoridom more generally, is that our women will do what they kind of need to do, and sometimes that might break convention, so to speak. And when I used kia whakawāhine au ahau and as the title of my thesis, it's I'm like make me like a woman. It wasn't really to override that whakatauki or that proverb that Wairaka spoke, but it was really to talk about how in today's context the assumption might be that we have to be like men to lead well, and actually women lead best when they lead as they are, and we have things to offer that are really important and critical within our communities, and we can't be like men, so why should we try and be like men? Like, just claim who we are and be who we are.
So specifically on your research, because you gave a really good introduction, kind of if we think about te kore te pō, cosmology stories, creation stories. I'm traversing over I'm giving license to, 100-year periods if we use Pākehā time. But you really spent time around when Christianity, colonisation, and our formative years once, colonisation arrived here. And you spend a lot of time in your research really unpacking that to get to. So maybe if we start there, Irene, can you talk us through what that looked like?
I think you can't talk about anything to do with Māori without talking about colonisation. You have to actually set the context that we're living in, and the church had a huge role to play in that. And also, if you're talking about women in particular, you can't not talk about patriarchy, and patriarchy is embedded within the church.
So what is patriarchy, Irene, again, in plain language for those of us?
Patriarchy, it's like assuming that men are
the norm.
Norm, that males are born to be leaders, are born to be in charge, that everything is through the male. I guess if you look at our past, when the English first came here, the husbands were in charge. The wives basically belonged to their husbands, and then their daughters belonged to the husbands, to the fathers. And then once they were married, it's like the dad was giving their daughters to the husband. Up until 1984 in Aotearoa, it was still not illegal for husbands to, beat their wives. So in our country, we have these kind of like, we have this history of celebrating the suffragettes, but actually women were still suffering in 1984, and then it kind of eliminates the history that we had here before colonisation, where women were actually already voting in Māori communities. They were already leaders, and they were already rangatira. So actually what happened with colonisation is the role of women for Māori women was taken away.
Did we adopt really early, and how was Christianity part of that in terms of, did they go together? Was it almost, dare I say it, a facilitation of our, things have changed for us?
I I think when Māori were the ones who were disseminating the message and the Gospels themselves, they they stayed within their own social context, and they had certain things that changed, obviously, but that hierarchy of gender, I suppose, wouldn't have changed immediately. I feel like that was something that came later when ministers from England were then telling Māori how they needed to be Christian and how to behave as a Christian person, like whether or not you're doing it right or wrong. But before that, Māori were spreading the gospel themselves, and they were doing a pretty good job of it.
Right.
And they didn't need to conform because they were in charge of, what they were up to. So
yeah. In your research, you describe it as sort of catastrophic for us in terms of the impact.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go on, Christianity's place in that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just unpack for us, that just what were the three big, I guess, what happened to Māori women? We know sort of what the cause was, but what was the outcome?
Well, I think the cause of, it was colonisation. At first, I think the church was really trying to get alongside Māori, but the government then came in behind the church, and I suppose the church had to choose which agenda they were going to follow, and they chose the government.
Right.
And I think three things that would have been like really detrimental for women in particular. It was the change of our social context, of the social fabric of Māori communities. Like, we're very collective and, multi-generational context. And then there's this other example of a nuclear family and husband and wife and 2.3 children or whatever it might be. And that expectation to conform and our way is right and your way is wrong. There's that. There's the expectation that the men should be in charge, and the role that a woman needs to play is this role, and you aren't actually fulfilling it as a Māori woman. You're too wild, or you're too you have too much freedom. You shouldn't be allowed to do that because this is how a woman should behave. And then of course, then it would have been through school, I suppose, through the kura system. Men and women were taught how to do different roles. Like, men, the boys, were taught to grow gardens, and women to sew and cook. So, yeah, there's definite ways that were embedded from colonisation right through.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that women didn't do some of those things prior to that, because they certainly did, but it wasn't necessarily an imposed thing. Like, men cooked as well. Like, my koro, he cooked in our house. He didn't think it was an assault to his manhood that he cooked. He actually really enjoyed feeding us, and, so...
How did it have an impact on leadership roles within the church, though? Because you've got let's say, overrepresentation of male, wasn't it assumed that it would be the males who would lead and therefore take on leadership roles?
Well, I think it already was that when the church came here. So it just carried on with their tradition. I don't think that...
was that normal for you? It was more normal to have male, who were for yourself in your church, in your congregation? Well,
I mean, when I started seeking out, a church to go to and be a part of, it took me a long time to find a church that I really felt like at home in. So,
interesting.
A lot of the churches that I went to, I stayed for a time, and then I found I really didn't fit. And I think one of the biggest things that really stood out to me was this expectation that if you want to go to church, you have to behave a certain way. You have to look like the right kind of family. You have to submit to your husband. You have to there were all sorts of silly rules that I just thought were ridiculous.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't want to be a part of this church if I have to look like this and be like this, because that's not who I am. And so I'd stay for a time, and then, you slowly start to see the culture of a place. And then I was like, okay, well, time to move on.
And where did this whole, because it's a stereotype, this angry black woman stereotype, let's call it that.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that start to, was it from there that your inception and integration into different churches, what you saw, or where did this come from?
I guess it's just in general, like life in general. When I had my children, because, throughout my schooling years, I was in bilingual education. They didn't have pūrākau then, because I'm a little bit older, but my kura years were bilingual. I was with my own peers who are Māori, or in Greyland, Ngā Puna Waiōria. And then when I left school and I went to uni, there was no cultural support in those spaces. So I sort of decided that, and it was a subconscious decision to fit in, to conform.
What were the things you were seeing, that you began to, I don't know, not be inspired. Inspired's quite, but the framing of this angry black woman stereotype. But, did it come from, where was it? It was experiences? Or?
I think it was, I went, when I went to uni, and I was kind of like fed this lie that if I don't do it a certain way, I'm not going to achieve, and I'm not going to do well, and I'm not going to succeed. I lived that way for probably 10 years. And then eventually I was like, well, this sucks, and I don't like it, and I'm not really who I am. So I just decided I'm actually going to be who I am. And then I became quite unapologetic about it. Like, people would be like, oh, you should do this. And I'm like, why? Why should I do that? Can you tell me why? And I wouldn't be like, I don't feel like that. I think that's a valid question. Like, why should I do that? Can you tell me why I should do that? And they didn't have an answer. But my question would make them feel uncomfortable. And there were lots of instances of similar kind of interactions like that, where I'd ask them why. They couldn't answer me, and they would feel uncomfortable. And then they would blame me for them feeling uncomfortable.
Can you, so it's a good segue into the actual premise of Angry Black Woman itself, and I'm really keen to give it the particular context about Māori woman. So, and if we start there first, and then maybe a bit into the actual research you did, and then unpacking that from a church perspective.
About the Angry Black
woman. Can you just quickly tell us, where does that come from?
There is a particular stereotype in the US that's been written about around the angry black woman. When I started looking for that myself when I was working in a leadership role, and I won't go into sort of details, but I was working in this role where I noticed that how I carried myself, whether I was disrespectful or not, and I wasn't, but I would just, hold my space and not be pushed, or not laugh off silly comments people would make. Like, I'd ask, like, why are you saying this, or why do you feel this way? And that same discomfort would happen. And I noticed that I was being framed as quite confrontational and angry. And I wasn't angry, and I'm kind of...
Would you get the feedback from your peers or your above, or how did you know that?
You just kind of know, and then you hear things, and
were you even given formal feedback?
No, it was never like that. It was always just like
inside.
You just know, because people kind of might avoid you a little bit, and
here she comes. Go the other way.
And I'm actually I think I'm quite a nice person, generally, but I don't, I'm also not scared to ask a question. And so I think that it catches people off guard, because generally I'm quite kind. And
so it's
so then when I started looking for anything that kind of talked about that for us as Māori women, because I had other friends in all different places who were Māori who had the exact same experience. There's nothing written. Right. And so when I looked at the literature, it was all in America. It was all around the angry black woman.
Yeah. So it comes from has it got a particular workplace context, that one?
There's a couple of different publications that I've seen.
Yeah.
And some of them are on academic spaces. Yeah. And
because I always have a little laugh when, that concept of woke is sort of really demonized, but actually that came from Kimberly Crenshaw, right? She was she's a black professor, and that was all about equity. Yeah. And now it's all been reframed that other people, anyway.
She talks about intersectionality.
That's right. And that two things can be true at once, right? You can still be, be wanting equity. There's another book as well, a woman called Ruby Hamad, and I don't think she is Australian. She's definitely a woman of colour, BIPOC. But it's called White Tears, Brown Scars, and it's all about that as well. It's got a particular context, but coming back to us, so because I think there's so many examples that you can think of, very Māori examples. My first, I guess, question back is how do we, and can it be true that you can actually be a nice person but also be passionate versus angry?
Oh, yeah.
And how do we, because human emotions are what, kāria rotoa is what makes us human. And, we seem to be okay to sit in aroha and those sorts of things, but we have to acknowledge with that is a range of emotions.
Of course. And
so how do we be human?
Well, I guess we all have to demonstrate a measure of emotional intelligence and all that we do. And I think one of the things that really came out of my rangahau is how the women were really good at demonstrating that intelligence because they understood the cost of showing too much emotion. And so they understood that if they showed anger or if they showed displeasure, that it wasn't seen as, something that was going to do them any favours. But that's some of the inequity that exists. And that's what I kind of wrote about because what other group needs to, manage their emotions and their behaviour in that way? And why can't we show that we're unhappy with something? Because it's actually healthy, for us to express our emotions as long as it's not hurting other people. But I think that people women, it's a historical thing. Women are not meant to show displeasure. They're meant to show happiness and, compliance, I suppose, historically. And when we veer away from that social expectation and we challenge and we ask the hard questions, we're then viewed as not being feminine enough or not conforming to social expectations. And that is what is, I feel, that is kind of like projected onto us, and people's discomfort around that is projected back onto us, which is really unfair.
Yeah, social notions not crafted or intended by us. And I wondered if you can, so you had 5 interviewees and I'm allowed to name them, and I'm allowed to name them to thank them, of course, for being part of the research. So I just wanted to thank you again to Hannah, Jenny, Tui, Marama and to Uri Kore. One of the things that they talked about, wairuatanga is an integral dimension of Māori wellbeing for women. And so what you did with your research is to normalise this conversation, but quickly unpack it to say it's actually a strength. The angry black woman thing is, once you get over it being a myth and lots of, and not measured against, what about spirituality being an integral part of our well-being?
Well, I think with the research that came out, some of the findings that came out, of course, wairuatanga is a huge part of the well-being of women, of us all as just human beings. But for the research, it was a protective factor and a well-being factor of having wairuatanga. And I think if you can't isolate one part of a of a person's well-being from the others. So they, the women were obvious leaders. Like if you look at some of the stories that they shared and the things that they talked about, you can see that they're leaders, but you can also see the way that they were groomed into leadership. There's a really good example in my thesis that I feel like I'm just giving myself a big plug here, but
get it, girl. That's what it's for. You put on all that mahi.
There's one wahine that talks explicitly. She's a executive leader, and she talks about how in her own, it might not be written because we had conversations around it as well, but she talks about how her way of working in those leadership spaces is she's actually really good at talking with other men because she works predominantly with Pākehā men. So she gets on really well with them. She's really good at talking to them. She is really good at just being straight to the point. But what she has noticed is how uncomfortable she makes other non-Māori women. And that she was in a meeting this one particular time, which is written about, and the woman in the room started crying when she was making a point. You know, she was just presenting an idea. She's talking about an idea or a thing, but this woman took it really personally and started crying. And this is in an executive leadership meeting, like a board meeting. And the thing that she also noticed was that the other men that were in the room took it upon themselves to then think that they needed to save this woman who was crying. And so she then started almost being villainized because this woman was crying as if she had made her cry, but this woman cried of her own accord. Like there's a
tell us about the research. Is that a known, with what you're describing there? Yeah. What is that term,
It's
Irene?
called white woman tears.
Tell us about that.
It's quite a historic positionality for women, and it's written about a lot in America, but also even here. And so what that is because of what I was saying before, women were the chattels of their husbands or their fathers. They belonged to a man. And so a lot of the time, the only way a woman historically could gain power was if they started to cry. It was a way of being able to, I guess, manipulate.
So how does it show up? Is it literal tears? Is it just
a lot of the time it's literal tears?
What else?
It's
how else?
Positioning yourself as being the victim, or that someone is bullying you, or that someone is, harming you. And it almost invokes, in a lot of the time, men, this desire to protect this woman.
Well, can we talk about that? So for any men who are put in this situation or end up in this situation, what is the better way? How do they, because I think, we got to acknowledge for our men, I think it can be quite perplexing, quite confusing, not sure what is appropriate.
Yes.
What do I do? Even do I lean in and hug? Well, that's appropriate.
Probably not.
Don't hug, don't touch.
In an executive leadership
no.
meeting, I don't know, but I guess in this
what would you like to see?
She observed that, she's also a woman. But
the tendency quickly went to
protect this woman who was crying, and she observed that this had happened. So she had to actually say, I'm talking about the situation. We're not making any personal attacks on anybody. The other thing that she noticed about these particular women was that the men in the room would often comment on what they were wearing, or, make really almost sexist comments about.
So where's the line though? Because where's the line between you look nice today versus, or can you still not say that either?
Well, I don't know, but she said it was okay for them to comment and to make remarks about them personally, and she wasn't talking about them personally at all, but they were crying. And so I guess these kind of situations impact on us as well, because are we not worth defending either? I guess her point was, I did nothing wrong, and yet I'm being made to be the villain. And we're talking about a situation that needed fixing, and this person's idea wasn't
and an executive setting.
Yes.
Well, how do I navigate out of that, Irene, if I find myself in that moment and it's clear some tears or even, why are you attacking me, that sort of thing. I think I've seen it before. How do I navigate as a wahine out of that if I'm in the moment?
Well, I guess you can't stop someone who's crying, but you can certainly speak. Like, I would not talk about it later, and I would ask them, why are you crying? And I would probably, it depends on the situation, I suppose. And I have seen it and heard about it in other situations as well, about women crying because they don't know how to deal with us and us holding our space and asking the hard questions. And so the only defense, I guess, they have is to cry. And I think in a lot of ways that this is almost used to shut the conversation down, to dismiss the conversation, and to almost invalidate what we're saying and framing us as bullies. But we're not bullies. We're just asking a hard question that people find uncomfortable. And I think that's really where we have to focus and make it really be known that, there's nothing inappropriate that was said. We didn't do anything, or, that's not, you're in the same room, we saw the same thing, but somehow this is what's happening. So I guess it's to continue to not let that conversation not be had. It has to be spoken about.
Yeah, and acknowledge that it's true, that it's happening, that it's valid, and also making sure, and you spoke about as well, having, making sure that we do have a community gang of other wahine, that we have a safe space to lean into with each other. What about, Irene, in your research, again, we spoke about the woman that you interviewed, some of their experiences and how they're traversing between their faith, their spirituality, being woman, being a wahine, particular to us. Would you be able to just give us a couple of what comes to mind? I know there was 5 of them, but...
I think a couple of really interesting ones. One of the wahine, her name is Tui, she would ask a priest to come and pray for her, as well as a tohunga. So it wasn't this or that. It was, she was really comfortable with sitting.
These dualities, I guess.
Like, it wasn't that she had to let go of what her beliefs as a Māori woman to also have a whakapono that was Christian-based or faith-based and within, I guess, more of a hāhi kind of context. Another one, I think, was one of the wahine talks about, going to prayer, to tuku, to let go of some of the harm, the racial harm that she endures.
Using that as a channel.
Using that as a way to let it go so that it doesn't sit within her too long. Because I guess that's the thing, if you're working in a space where you are intentionally pushing against the status quo, you are going to be challenged, and it's going to impact you and affect you on a daily basis. And so the wahine had to find a way of being able to get rid of that, because you can only survive in that for so long before people get burnt out.
Yes.
So I think that was one of the but those findings were so important in creating the framework that I have at the end, is just being able to find a way of maintaining some kind of well-being and being able to let it all go.
In your framework, has there been, do you think we could have more across our spaces?
Well, I'm in my PhD, because it hasn't gone very deep, because my master's is quite small for research. And
that's amazing.
There wasn't enough time, I think, to really dig down into it. But I've just started my PhD in the beginning of September at the University of Auckland, and I'm in the School of Psychology. So we're going to kind of, I guess, try and extend on that. I'm going to try and extend on that. And it's going to be looking particularly at wahine in the church. And amazing. So watch that space.
Yeah, it's such an important conversation, and we're so grateful for you to have it. Most importantly, within Te Hāhi Mihinari, but for all of us, wāhine, I think this is such an important mahi because I think we can all be benefactors for ourselves and how we are to each other, and ensuring that we, love and look after each other, but also ultimately, as a demographic, our population changes. So, thank you, Irene. Tēnā koe.
Yeah. I think when you talk about who we are and, our values as followers of Jesus, and then our tikanga-based values and te ao Māori, they really do align. And so I think it's not losing sight of those values and remembering who we are. And if we're doing that well, then we are really looking after each other. Yeah.
Beautiful. And what, so for, I was going to say mihinari leadership, but it can be anyone in any space.
Mm-hmm.
How do we ensure we're not repeating the institutional exclusion, I guess, of women, so that these tropes, these stereotypes continue pretty much, they continue. It might not be so obvious, but if you're shutting down women, Māori women in particular, because you think that they are reacting or they just have a voice,
I think,
how do we not repeat the mistakes of the past?
I guess part of it would be to actually have Māori women at the table, helping to make some of those decisions. And I guess it would be one of the traps I have seen happen, or one of the things that I've seen happen is often, there's this preferred Māori woman that the non-Māori leaders would like to have at the table, because that leader will say what they want.
Right.
But that's actually not doing us any favours, and that's just reinforcing and re-embedding what's already happening. So I guess it would be having a Māori woman at the table who isn't just going to say what people want them to say, who's going to actually say the uncomfortable thing and be okay within themselves that they're saying it, but also not making them feel bad for saying it, because if things are to change, those spaces need to be created for people to say those things and to be heard as well. Like whenever I share my rangahau at a symposium or at a talk or something, I always ask right at the beginning for people to hear what I have to say, and reflect on what they're feeling as I'm saying it, and be curious about why they're having those feelings, and to just sit with it, but to still hear and listen what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because people sometimes get so defensive that they can't hear anymore. And I really want people to sit with their feelings and maybe think about and reflect on it and why they are having those feelings in the first place.
Well, it's a great, and dare I ask this, but you've set a pathway, I think. Are we as Māori women more inclined to be a certain way to each other? Are we mean to each other? Is there a particular, and so I'm going to quickly put my hand up and say, there's a stereotype, I guess it's like catty,
well,
women, but are we? I want to ask.
I've worked with Māori women a lot of my professional life, and in the spaces where I've worked, the majority of the time, my experience have been really positive.
Yay.
They've been really positive, but what I would say is that these women ground themselves in a certain way of working. Like they hono to a tikanga, they adhere to a certain way of working, and it's written in my thesis actually. And I suppose I choose to surround myself in those spaces. Like I can be a little bit selective about where I work and what I do, so that's where I choose to be. I think if you're not grounding yourself in a real healthy tikanga, whether you're Māori or not Māori, then then you're not going to have a good experience, and that bullying can happen. And I do write about that as well, because I've certainly seen Māori women be terrible, and I choose not to be around those spaces because it's not healthy, and it's not congruent with where I think we need to. Like I feel like a lot of the time, especially in being in a space where I really want to support Māori development, that I need to be a good example, and I need to be in spaces that are the same.
And is it your spirituality? So if we use, we've all had experiences as we've come through life, age, learning. A spirituality, wairuatanga, Christianity, that journey, is it a place of rongoa?
My faith, definitely.
Yeah.
My belief in God and Jesus, yes. I wouldn't say that the church has always been a place of safety, because I think we all know that's not true.
And the woman spoke about that. They had different examples as well.
But any institution can have those same unhealthy culture, behaviours, what have you. And I think, especially in the church where, if we're talking about women being unkind to other women, the church is the kind of space that can really foster that kind of behaviour, because you have oftentimes men who are put into leadership roles because they're the ones that are the, priests or whatever that role they have. And by default, often their wives will get a leadership role regardless of whether they have those skills or that experience. And sometimes that can be really dangerous, and it can really be harmful and create really harmful experiences for other women.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a problem. That can be a problem.
What's the solution, Irene? Does it go back to emotional intelligence or conversations?
I don't know if there is a solution. I know that I have ideas.
Yeah, great. And anyone get a hold of Irene's research ASAP to ideas.
Yeah, I have ideas, but I think at the end of it, it's like any kind of leadership role that anyone would have. You have to have a certain kind of experience behind you, and then you get a lot of training to learn how to do things better. And I feel like some people don't have that.
Yeah. Irene, just quickly, so just a couple of evolving terms. So masking is when we show up and not quite ourselves, right? Is tone policing is when someone else plays back to us what they think we should be saying, or what you mean? Because I think these are things that Māori women in particular are quite subject to, whether it's in a workplace. I just wonder some of these modern day evolving language. Tone policing?
I suppose I don't really talk about tone policing.
What is it?
I kind of talk more about racial code switching.
Right. What is that?
Which is where you
swap teams quickly.
Well, I think we're brought up in a certain way, and in a Māori way, and how, I suppose I decided I was going to code switch when I left school, because I went to uni and I thought it wasn't going to do me any favours to be Māori, so I tried to be Pākehā, which didn't really work out for me either. I have Pākehā whakapapa, but I wasn't brought up that way, so so it was really bad for my health, for my hauora, my well-being. And the research that talks about code switching in that way shows that there's quite a lot of stress involved in having to do that, and stepping into a space and then suppressing part of your identity to fit in and to conform. And that's also an equity issue as well, because people who don't have to do that actually don't suffer from that at all. They don't suffer any stress from it. They aren't expected to conform, and they aren't looked at sideways if they decide that they want to bring Will up for lunch or.
So for any Māori woman listening who might feel like they are, oh my gosh, that's me.
Yeah.
What is something you would say for them, just as individuals?
I think
individual wahine.
I think if you feel like you're being gaslit, you probably are.
And what's gaslighting?
when someone is I guess, you feel
Minimizing,
attacked. You feel attacked, and that things that are happening for you are being
not
minimized.
that big a deal.
Yeah, that's
or
not
your
big a
reaction.
deal. Yeah, you're overreacting.
Or it could be like your reaction, you're just angry, you're being angry, you're missing the point, which comes back to, that's one of the features of this stereotype, right?
Yeah. And with it's almost like what you were talking about before with can one thing exist with another? Can you be a kind person and show anger or what have you? It's the same as, we don't talk about racism because racism offends people when we talk about it. But one of the things, and there's a woman called Robin DiAngelo that writes about this and others, but
it's the racist book, eh?
She writes about white fragility, but what she talks about is that the fact that the reason why people get so upset about the racist conversation is because they don't understand that you can be racist and be a really good person at the same time. They feel like that to be racist is to be a bad person, but lots of really good people are also very racist.
So it's a good, how does the church, and with the mihinari in particular, ensure that we don't repeat, given the legacy of the past, how do we not repeat that so that we can be inclusive now and going forward?
I think it's just being able to, again, have different conversations with different people and be able to really hear what people are trying to tell you.
Do you see a change in the leadership within the church?
I feel like there is some really good leadership. What
does good look like?
Well, inclusive, diversity, more than one kind of voice. It's really important. All the research shows as well that women on boards actually makes boards more effective. So
what does safety look like within Te Hahi Mihinari in Naene? What does safety look like right now? And do you think it can evolve? Has it got an opportunity to evolve so that things like the angry black woman and a Māori perspective, Wāhine Māori, can dissipate? What does safety look like, Irene?
I think that the church is a mirror to our broader society. So there's a lot of changes that need to happen. We only have to read the newspaper and see, look online and see what's happening in our communities. And, you have Hana Rāwhiti who done a haka in Parliament. She's just being a Māori woman and in my view, not disrespectful and not rude, just being who she is.
You and about 800 million people across Australia.
But she is being demonised and framed as...
From some, right. And is the demonisation, does that stem back to this stereotype?
Oh, 100%.
Right.
It is. It's inappropriate behaviour. You cannot behave like that,
What about our own that might have this thought? What is your 1 minute to them? Not you're wrong, but what is your plea to them when they go look at a hana and they look at, other of our sheroes, I'll call them, and go, oh, that she's just actually angry?
Well, there's, I guess it's to see that there's, not to minimise their experience of being Māori, because there's lots of different ways that we are Māori and that we express who we are as a Māori person, but it's not their job to reinforce racism either. So I would say your way of expressing who you are as a Māori person is entirely valid, and so is Hana's. And for anybody to kind of, to say that that's not okay, I feel like that's not okay.
I love that. Irene, I want to spend some time, the last sort of 10 minutes on te oranga ake and how has that lived in your life, first and foremost, thinking about humanity flourishing, being good towards ourselves, aroha, joy, listening. Yeah, how has that lived for you? What does a day in the life of Irene look like, first and foremost, within this framework?
Well, my job, my professional life, I suppose, I'm a researcher.
Right.
And so...
But do you get out of bed and go, I'm a researcher? Or what do you... what happens for you?
It's like kaupapa Māori. It's the whole experience of making things better for our people. So, and that extends to my own family. So if we make space for us, we can be who we are. It's actually good for everybody.
What are a couple of practices that are particular to your whānau that keep your faith and your love for others? Well, first, actually, let's start with love for selves first. What's a couple of things that you do?
I think in our own family, we just, I don't know, we have this tradition in our family, actually.
Tell us.
So me and my siblings, we live probably about 2 or 3 minutes away from each other. So we kind of chose to live really close to each other.
I love that.
And all of our kids are super close.
Beautiful.
Cousins. And we have this thing called dinner, which is not quite lunch and not quite dinner. And it's always on a Sunday afternoon. So whoever's birthday falls in a particular month will have dinner for those people.
Cool.
So we end up, because we've got so many kids and there's lots of us, we end up pretty much meeting at least once a month with all of our kids and all of our family and everybody all together. And that's sort of how we have, it's our kids love it.
Yeah.
Like our kids are grown up now. They make sure they come. Some of them are grown up. And it's something they don't miss. And we don't do anything super special. We just have food and a cake and hang out and eat and laugh. And
how do you build in the practice of your whānau spirituality and your Christianity?
Well, for me, for my whare, for us, we do karakia. We go to church. So I suppose those are our practices. For my brothers, one of my brothers, well, both of my brothers, neither of them are Christian. It's just me. So, and my husband and our whare. So,
and why do you think that's something that's been particular to you?
I'm not sure actually. I suppose I was the one that decided that I would. I don't know. I chose it. I'm not sure. Like, I mean, I always talk to my brothers about it, and we always, they show up for me, whether it's a Christian kaupapa or a non-Christian kaupapa. So they're not like anti. They just, I
know. I think one of the interviewees talked about the channel that she uses to tuku and in times when she needs to. Do you have any similar examples? Those sound like Lina. I love Lina. But what about when, you've got times where your faith is where you go to?
Quite often, like if I'm a little bit, if I'm feeling a certain way about people, that's not nice. I often will go to karakia or to hang out with God a little bit, just because I don't want to have that sitting in me. And I suppose other times is,
what about with your kids? Is that a place that you take them to solve real issues?
With my younger son, he, me and him have. He's getting older now, so he's less kind of like wanting to come with me to do church things. But he used to be my little shadow and be everywhere where I was. But he still has his beliefs and his faith. So sometimes he'll just come and ask me to pray. But it's becoming a little bit less. But I know he still has his beliefs.
Can I just before we finish, Irene, if you can kōrero mai I tō huarahi mau kauai? Can you just share a little bit about your stunning kauai first, perhaps motivation, and then how it fits into stepping into and owning our space as wahine?
When I was actually this was a real wairoa thing actually.
Wow.
So I was with a friend of mine at her house, and I was sitting across from her sister-in-law, who I'd never met before, and she said to me, "I hope you don't mind, but I see things and I see your grandmother." And just before she had said that to me, I had just had this thought of my great-grandmother pop in my head, and she's the last wahine in our whānau line to maumoko kauai.
Right.
And so when she said that, I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then she said, and then we started talking a little bit more, and then I found out that she knew one of my cousins who's a moko artist,
Right.
but he lives in Australia, a really close cousin, sorry, not a really close cousin, but a cousin that, would come back once a year and do moko papa in Aotearoa back in Whakatane. So when I said to her, well, I actually know he's coming back, but he's got no spaces left. So at some point I will, get my moko kauai, because she asked me about it. In that moment, she said, are you going to get your moko kauai? Because I had a sense from your grandmother that, she was saying it's time now. And I was like, oh, that's strange, But anyway, I said, look, if it happens, I'll go with I'll go with what I'm, feeling at the time. And then about 3 weeks later, a cousin of mine got in touch and said, oh, Tu's coming back. Do you want to go get your moko kauai done? And I said, oh, no, he doesn't have any spaces left. And then she messages me back about 2 minutes later, and she said, you're booked in for this day at this time, and so make sure you're there in Whakatane. And so I went, I was like, okay.
Beautiful.
And so when I went back, he has the same great-grandmother that that we were talking about. So when I met with him, I said, this is the story of how I got here. And our great-grandmother, Pare, I told him about her, and so he incorporated some of her pattern in mine. Yeah.
Beautiful. And for because there's so many, and incredibly, and such a scale now, a mass, a hunga building of our wahine mai moko. For anyone that has an experience where they might get, I don't know, asked, I've heard this happen in public as a symbol of being wahine. Have you had that experience, and how did you traverse that?
I've had some positive and I wouldn't say negative experiences, mostly positive. But when I did notice, I knew before I got it that it's a political statement. That wasn't why I was doing it, but I knew that it would, it would distinguish me in a way that I was never, kind of looked at before.
Yeah.
And I noticed that straight away, that people would look at me, see me, and then see this. And they might have been smiling when they first made eye contact, and then smile fades. And then that, that you're different, that things are different, which shouldn't bother me. I feel like if you are strong in who you are, then you can carry it. It's fine.
And that's what I noticed in your rangahau, you talked about, you acknowledged the whole front section was around our experience, but then I feel like as you shared stories and yours as well, really leaning into our multidimensional identity we have that is specific to Wāhine Māori. And moving on, so Irene, I guess just to sort of finish off coming back to this framing of te orangake in your own life. We heard about Lina. We heard about you now, Maumoko, which is a very spiritual for you. What is next for Irene in terms of your spirituality, and how do you, if you could share with the faith, with mihinare, the hahi mihinare?
Well, I feel like for me personally, I'm very well supported in te hahi mihinare. I have
Beautiful.
had a really good experience here. I'm not saying that it's like that for everybody, but I can only speak for myself. And so part of my journey here is I've been doing ministry training with Te Hahi Mihinare, and I'm not 100% where that's going to lead to, but I'm going with the process at the moment, and that's quite exciting. I started my PhD now, so I'm I've just applied for St. John's, but I'm not sure how my application's going to go, so I'm still like waiting.
Well, there you go. Anyone listening, can you know, put that through, please?
Yeah, but so I'm just still kind of waiting on that. But that could be another, I guess, part of my journey with the Anglican Church more broadly, I suppose.
And I guess the beautiful thing, it's, you know, e kore me miti, it will never end, right? This whole journey, and it's one that will keep traversing. Just the last bit that was on there, Irene, just any, I guess, for the church in terms of being more inclusive of people that might not know that part of them, or maybe they have sat in a, I don't know, conflicted space, but anyone that wants to step back in, or is there anything the church can be doing to welcome people or bring them back with aroha? For
anybody quite new to the church, a lot of the things can be quite different and new and strange. But one of the things, I suppose, for me coming into the hāhi was the reo was really beautiful. And that was definitely like something that pulled me in, is hearing our reo and our sound being used in...
What if you don't have your reo?
If you don't have your reo, then there's
still a place for you? There's still a place for you?
Of course, yeah, because everybody is...
Also, if you can't sing, what if you can't sing? Still a place for me too.
Still a place for the non-singers, but I definitely think that there is a place for everyone if they want that kind of place. It's definitely been a nice space for me to be a part of, that's for sure. So I don't know, I suppose it's different for everybody. But yeah, that's kind of, those are the things that pulled me in. For the church to understand about people coming in who might not know, they don't know why you're standing up or sitting down. You kind of need a,
but you can come and learn.
They don't know all the rules and they don't know all the traditions. So people take time, but I feel like at the same time the church is quite gracious around that. So
beautiful. Yeah. I love that graciousness. Well, tērā pia me kāti ki konei. Irene, e mihi ana kia koe mō tō rangahau whakahirahira, e pāna ki tēnei kaupapa. Ka tuku te rākau kia koe ki te whakakapi. I'm going to pass it back to you, Irene, after congratulating you, of course, on this big piece of work. And it's so important. And I love the way that you comfortably bring everyone into that as well. And also, when you go through the research, there's a place for everyone too. I think potentially when you first look at it, the sort of angry black woman, it could be quite confronting from a number of sides. But I love the way that you unpacked all of that with comfort. I'm going to pass it back to you, and I just wonder, within this oranga ake framework around love for ourselves, love for others, finding joy, but particularly for our wahine, if there is a couple of things, well, I'm going to leave it to you to really share that message.
I think when I wrote my thesis, I wrote it for women who are mostly in non-Māori spaces and when I use the term leadership, I really acknowledge that a lot of our wahine are doing leadership work without actually having a title. So it's not even about having a role and being a manager or being this or that. It's actually someone who's actually doing the mahi. And I really wrote this to really validate their experiences and give them an understanding of what it is that is going on and happening for them. So I just encourage us all to sort of understand what's going on for us and to really feel validated. And that's basically why I wrote it, because once you understand, it's kind of like you can navigate things better instead of sitting there wondering what the heck's going on, what's happening here. Yeah,
beautiful. Thank you, Irene, again. E mihi ana kia koe, e mihi ana kia koutou, e whakarongo ana. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.